Hello, my name is Lee Taylor, and I really like to knit, so much so that some of my friends call me the Knitwit. I hope you enjoyed today's video and possibly even learned something. So let's get started. Welcome to this week's Knit Bit. We have a lot planned, so let's go ahead and jump in. We are going to be looking at a stash dive of my wild yarn. We're going to be doing a swatch lab together. We've got look at project updates, and then we have a bonus bit at the end of this week's video. So I'm excited, so let's get going. First up, as always, we are going to take a stash dive. We're going to be looking at what I call the wild yarns. They are all the crazy variegated yarns. They may be the same color, but not usually. Usually it goes through a spectrum of different colors. So let's go over and take a look at the wild yarn in the stash dive this week. Let's take a look at this week's stash dive up close and personal. First off, we have Premier Yarns in their Serenity Sock Prints line. This is a fingering weight yarn, and it is a blend of 50, 25, 25 of merino, nylon, and rayon from bamboo. 50 grams gives you 230 yards, and the colorway is gray flannel. Next up, we're going to take a look at this yarn again, because now we're actually going to talk about it. This is Yarn Art Flowers brand. It is a fingering weight yarn, 55% cotton, 45% acrylic, 250 grams, gives you 1,094 yards, and the color is number 267. Next, we have Sugarbush yarn in their Itty Bitty line. This is a sport weight, which I don't get to show very often, but it's actually one of my favorites. It's just trickier for me to find. It is 65% merino, 25% nylon, and 10% cashmere. They are sold in 50-gram bowls, which gives you 153 yards, and the colorway is Flannel Flare. And I have actually moved this, as of now, out of the wild cubby and into my red cubby. The red cubby is a little sparse, so I'm gonna plump it up with this yarn here, because I have two of these. Next, we have Lion brand yarn in their Mandala line. It is a DK weight. Sorry, I'm tripping over my words today. 100 fully acrylic, 150 grams gives you 590 yards. I have 3 skeins of the exact same brand, just different colors, so I'm going to show you those now. This is Serpent. This one is Thunderbird. And this one is Wizard. Let me zoom out a little bit. There we go. So again, Thunderbird, Serpent, Thunderbird, Wizard. Next up, we have what I'm going to call a controversial yarn. And it's not bad, it's just interesting. This is also Lion brand. This is their Shawl in a Cake, with the thought that there is plenty of yarn in this to knit a decent sized shawl. It is an Aran weight, and this is where it gets interesting. On Ravelry, it says this is 58% acrylic, 39% cotton, and 3% other. The Lion brand website, however, says that it's 58% cotton, 39% acrylic, and 3% other. So for sure 3% other, but they can't agree on which percentage is cotton and which percentage is acrylic, which I find very interesting, because Ravelry is usually very good about that. There is 150 grams in this, and that gives you 481 yards. And the colorway is Sun Salutations. And I don't know if it's showing up black, but the shawls up above my head are knit out of this. Next we have Red Heart Mini, and this is an Aran weight. It is 100% acrylic, and it comes in 45 gram cakes, and that gives you 72 yards. And the colors I have 3 of these in separate colors. So we have Periwinkle Peony, Seaweed, and Daisy Blooms. So again, I have 3 of these. They are the exact same yarn, exact same brand, everything, just different colors. So Seaweed, Periwinkle Peony, and Daisy Blooms. I cannot fit all of the yarns in for this stash dive as a group, but that is this week's stash dive, and hopefully you found one that you might like. Next, we're going to do a swatch lab together. So grab your needles and some yarn, and we are going to be looking at how to do a double yarn over, as well as how to work the decreases for the double yarn over, unless you want to actually increase your project. If you want to keep it the same size, we'll show you how to do the decreases in this next video. So let's switch over and do the swatch lab. As I mentioned in the overview, this week's swatch lab, we are going to take a look at double yarn overs and their decreases, but we're also going to take a look at regular yarn overs and their decreases. I have done a video talking about yarn overs in a future video, but now we're going to look at, if you do not want to increase the size of your fabric, how you can go about knitting some decreases so that way it doesn't increase. It keeps the same size, but it gives you the look of yarn over. So this is my skein of yarn. It's the linen, the same that I use for the Gnomes, and it's the one that I use mostly for my swatch labs because light yarns tend to show up a little bit better. And we're just going to use our usual 5mm double pointed needles. So first off, we're going to cast on some stitches, and I'm not going to cast on a whole bunch, maybe 12. Let's get these cast on here. So again, the point of a yarn over is to, 1, add an increase, so you're adding stitches, and 2, that it gives a lacy open mesh look, which can be a design all in and of itself. You can have nothing but yarn overs paired with decreases and have a beautiful project for like a shawl, shawl or a scarf. So let's see how many stitches we have here, because we're going to first off do the yarn over, the single yarn over and their decreases. So we really don't need a whole lot on here. So we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, and 10. So we're just going to go ahead and knit a regular row right across. And you can do everything that I'm showing you, you can do in stockinette if you would like. For the sake of this video, I'm just going to be doing knitting. That way I don't have to have a border and we can just get along through this section pretty quickly. Because the swatch labs have been a little bit longer here lately, and I don't want to bore viewers that may not be knitters. So we're just going to go ahead and knit this across. And then we will take a look at how simple it is to do a yarn over. So if you didn't see that first video, this will kind of catch you up to speed on where we are at. Okay, and I will put a link down at the bottom to that original video so you can go take a look at that as well. So what we're going to do is, you can't do a yarn over right at the beginning because then you wouldn't see the hole, so you've got to come in some. So I'm going to come in 1 stitch. Again, I'm doing garter. And then we're going to do a yarn over. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your working yarn and you're just going to wrap it around your working needle. We don't care about these stitches, just wrap it around your needle like that. And then you go on and knit. And let's say you were fixing to purl. So you move the yarn to the front to purl, and you're going to go to purl. Well, before you purl, you would just wrap it all the way around the needle again and then purl, and that would give you the exact same effect. But we're not doing that. So we did a knit stitch, a yarn over, a knit stitch. I'm going to do 2 knit stitches and then a yarn over. Okay, again, I'm just taking that working yarn and wrapping it around that working needle, and then we are going to just knit 2 stitches like so. Wrap the yarn around, knit 2 stitches, wrap the yarn around, and because I didn't knit 2 stitches, and then we are going to wrap the yarn around and knit our final stitch. So it's actually very symmetrical in that. So you can't see really what's going on yet, okay, except that there's extra stitches here. So when we come back around to knit, again, if you were going to purl, you would just purl all the way across and treat every stitch as if it was a regular stitch. But we're going to knit, so you're just going to go in and, oh, see that? Let me zoom in. See that right there? That is what a yarn over looks like when you're working it on the wrong side. So you just go in and work it as if it, sorry, it went off camera. You're going to go in and work it like you would any other stitch and go on. So there's an actual knit stitch. So we're going to knit that like regular. And we're just going to knit our way across. And when you get to a yarn over like that, you just go in and knit like regular. You just treat it like a normal stitch. The only difference is that it looks different in that there's going to be a hole, but we want that in this situation. There's a yarn over, just go in and knit it regular. And knit your way across the row. Okay, yarn over, regular knitting. So you would add these for decorative purposes. There's a yarn over. You would add it if you want to knit something that's going to be lightweight and not heavy. You could knit and add in yarn over. So there is what yarn overs look like. Okay, it's just a hole. And in patterns, a yarn over is often abbreviated to just simply YO. Okay, so there's regular yarn overs. Now, we're going to pair a yarn over with a decrease so we do not add stitches across, but we still get the looks of the yarn overs. Okay, so let's do our yarn overs and pair with decreases. So we're going to knit 2 stitches. Okay, now we want to get that wrapped around my finger like I like it. Okay, now we're going to do a yarn over. Okay, so we're just going to wrap the yarn around our needle like regular, but we want to pair it with a decrease. So a common decrease you work is a knit 2 together. So you see these 2 stitches here? We just care about these first 2. You're going to put your needle in that first stitch, okay, like you're going to knit it, but go all the way through both stitches. See how I've got that? And you're going to just bring your yarn around like you would regularly knit and come out both stitches. Okay, see how those 2 stitches right there on the needle? Now there's only 1. So we have done a yarn over and a decrease. So we have not added stitches. Okay, so now let's knit 2 stitches. Okay, make a yarn over, knit 2 together. Again, we only care about these first 2, and you're going to come in through the second one here and come and make sure you go all the way through without splitting your yarn, because you don't want to split yarn here. It's like that. If you need to pull that down, you can. And then knit that like that and pull that through both stitches, and those 2 stitches now become 1 stitch. Okay, so we knit 2 stitches, make a yarn over, knit 2 together, like so. And normally on our other one we would knit 2 stitches and do a yarn over, but we don't want to increase stitches, so we're just going to knit these last 3 stitches. Okay, we've got that. Now when you work back across on the wrong side, you are going to work it just like we did on that first one. You are, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more here and get our handy dandy yarn wand. We are just going to knit across, and when we get to a yarn over, which will look like this right here, okay, you'll see the hole. When you get to that hole, you just knit it like you would any other stitch, just like we did on these yarn overs down here. Okay, so I'm going to knit across the row, and then I'll meet you back at the beginning of the next row, because all we're doing here is just knitting across all of these stitches, okay? Okay, so this is what our yarn overs look like. We've got 3 across here, and when you block this out, you will block that and you will see the yarn overs much better, okay? It's going to look funky until you block it. So there's our yarn overs. Now I want to zoom in as close as I possibly can and show you these decreases. So let's get way down here. Okay, so there is our yarn over, and right here we worked our decreases. Okay, and see how that kind of tilts to the right like that? The other ones go straight up and down, but that V is kind of tilted a little bit to the right because we've got a stitch reaching over another stitch, okay? So that is what we call a right leaning decrease, because it leans towards the right. So if you worked a bunch of these together at the edge, your project on this side would go straight up, but your edge would come up towards the in a right angle, right diagonal, okay? Right leaning decrease. So now let's work a row of yarn overs with a decrease that leans to the left. So we'll zoom back out here. Find a less complicated knitting angle. I have to pull out a lot further than what I normally knit, so it's a little cumbersome on video. So we're going to do our usual. We're going to knit 2 stitches, because we're going to work this exactly like the bottom, except we're just going to switch out the decreases. So we've knit 2 stitches. Now we're going to yarn over, and now we're going to do what's called an SSK. That's how it's abbreviated, or slip, slip, knit. And it's very simple to do. There's a couple of different methods, but I'll show you the one that I use most often. You're going to go in like you're going to knit, okay? And you're just going to pull that stitch right off of there. Kind of like what we did in Mosaic, except we're doing it knit-wise instead of purl-wise. And we're going to slip that next one. Okay, just go in just like you would knit. Slip that off of there. Then put those back on that first needle. You're going to slide those back. So what we've done is we've changed the stitch mount. Okay, let's talk about that for a second. See, on this stitch right here, this front leg right here is to the right of that back leg. See how it kind of angles like this ever so slightly? So this side is slightly in front of this side. That is the traditional Western knitting style. So what we're doing now is we are now switching it to where this back leg is in front of this right leg. So let me slip these back over and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, see that right there? There's the front leg and the back leg is way over here. That's what we're talking about. That's how it is slipped. Okay, that's reversing the stitch mount, and that is how the stitches would be if you're knitting Eastern style. Okay, but there we'll go more in depth on that later. So we've slipped these 2 stitches knitwise. Now we're going to put our needle through these just like this, just like we would be slipping them back, but we don't do that. We knit them. This is called knitting through the back loop. Okay, so that way when we knit it through the back loop, what that does is that re-puts them in the right alignment, but that makes it lean to the left. Okay, so let's go ahead and knit 2 stitches. Okay, now we're going to do a yarn over and a slip, slip, knit. So slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit, bring this right needle, or left needle, I'm sorry, through like that, and knit it regular. So we've now knit through the back loop and knit those stitches, so those two now become one. So we've worked an increase with the yarn over and a decrease right here with an SSK, and that leans to the left. Knit 2 stitches. Now on a little side tangent here, you can tell I have a little bit longer nails than maybe the average guy would, and that is because I use them when I am knitting. I use them to hold stitches back, and it just gives me a little bit better grip. They're not necessary, but it just helps me a little bit. So we're going to slip, slip, because we worked our yarn over, slip, slip, bring that stitch like that, wrap it to knit, and we've now done a left leaning decrease, and then we knit to the end of this. Okay, now then, I'm going to knit across the back row on the wrong side, and it's just knitting straight across just like we've done on all of the stitches. You could again purl all the way across if you're looking for stockinette fabric, but I'm not, so I'm just going to knit across, and I'll meet you when we get back to the end. Okay, I'm back to the right side, and I'm going to kind of pull that down so you can see. Okay, so pardon my knuckles here. I'm going to stretch this out. So down here we worked a right leaning decrease. See how that's tilted slightly to the right? Up here we worked a left leaning decrease, so it angles to the left. So again, if you were working these along an edge stitch, this side would continue going up straight, and this side would be angling to the left like this. So you'd have a kind of a trapezoid shape. Okay, that's what I mean by a left leaning increase. So that is regular yarn overs paired with the more common decreases. Knit 2 together, SSK, and then just regular yarn overs to increase stitches. If you want just to increase, then you use just yarn over. If you want to keep your current stitch count, but you want the look of yarn overs, you work yarn over paired with a decrease. Now you can put the decrease after the yarn over or before it. That is entirely personal preference. You can have it tilt towards the yarn over, or you can have it angled away. So you can work a knit 2 together and then a yarn over, or you can work an SSK and then a yarn over. Either way works for you. You just have to play around and figure out how you want to do that. So now that we've got the regular yarn over and decreases worked, let's talk about double yarn overs, and that is what I used in the Scolopendra shawl. Let me grab that real quick. That is what I worked right here. Okay, those are double yarn overs. Those are single yarn overs. So normal size and double is going to be a little bit bigger because you've got 2 stacked together. So let's see what that looks like. Zoom out a little bit here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and knit our usual. We're going to knit 2 stitches. One, 2. Now we're going to work a double yarn over, and that is as easy as a single yarn over. I'm going to take the yarn, and I'm going to put my thumb over these stitches just to hold the needle. Take the yarn, wrap it around your working needle twice. Okay, so there is a wrap, and this right here will be a wrap. Okay, now we go in and we knit. So what you have done is you have added 2 stitches, double yarn over. Okay, and on that one, when you pull down, you can actually see the hole already forming. Fix Sorry, didn't mean to bump the camera. Fixing my thing around my hand the way I use it. Okay, so that has increased 2 stitches. So we've knit 2 stitches. Now we're going to yarn over twice. Once, twice. Knit 2 stitches. 1, 2. Yarn over twice. You wrap the yarn around it twice. Knit 2. 1, 2. Double yarn over, and I abbreviate that in my patterns as DYO. Sometimes it spells it out. Different patterns have different ways of abbreviating, so that way they don't have to write everything out, which would take a bunch of room. And in most patterns, they're going to have a section somewhere on the pattern that explains what their abbreviations mean. So take a look at that in your pattern and they will tell you. Double yarn over, knit 2, 1, 2. We got enough here for another double yarn over, knit 2. And then we only have 1 stitch left, so we're just going to knit that. Now then, this is where things get different on a double yarn over versus a single yarn over. When you're working back across these stitches, you have to treat the double yarn overs a little bit different. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so we're going to knit to our double yarn over, and it will be very obvious when you get to it. Double yarn over. Oh, double yarn over. So we can knit this first leg, okay? But if we try and knit this second leg, look at that. See how open that is? That there's nothing for that needle to grab. So it will become one giant gaping hole. So we can't do that. So what we have to do is we have to purl that. Okay? That locks that double yarn over in place. Okay? You can just knit one and slip it off. That is done in some patterns. However, I don't like that. So I don't do that because it's my knitting and I am in control. So now let's work to the next double yarn over. Okay, we're there. But this one we're going to work a little differently. This one we're going to purl the first stitch, like so, and then knit the second stitch. It doesn't matter which order you knit or purl it, just as long as you're working it differently. Okay, they can't be worked the same on both spots. So we're just going to work our way across. I'm going to go ahead and purl this one first, and then knit the second. And then on this next one, we will purl the first, and knit the second. Knit across. What I'm going to do is I'm going to purl first all the yarn overs in the middle section and have it banked by the knit first, then purl first. So purl first, knit first, purl first, knit first, so on and so forth until we get to the last. So this is not the end, so we're going to purl one. And this is on my swatch. You can do it totally different on your swatch. You are in control and you have the power to do what you want to. And then knit the second leg for mine. Knit across, and this is the last yarn over, double yarn over, so I'm going to knit the first one and purl the second one, and then knit the final 2 stitches. So what that has now done, it has increased 2 stitches for every double yarn over. And it's kind of tricky to see because it's still on the needle. Again, when you block this, this will be much more visible. Okay? I can't pull out too far, it'll come off the stitches. But there's double yarn overs. Okay? Knit first, then purl. Purl first, then knit all the way across. Now then, I talked about pairing double yarn overs with decreases. You have options here. If you want to do a double yarn over, but you only want to add 1 stitch rather than 2 stitches, work either a knit front back. No, not a knit front back. I'm sorry, that's a totally different thing. Either work a knit 2 together or an SSK, and that can be worked on either side again. Personal preference on which one. So if you're working a double yarn over because you want a bigger hole, but you only want to add 1 stitch, work it right next to a decrease, or work it and then, you know, work a decrease somewhere, and then that keeps everything balanced. If, however, you want to do a double yarn over, but no increase like we did down here with these single yarn overs, then what you would do is you would do a knit front, knit 2 together and an SSK, or a knit 2 together, knit 2 together, SSK, 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 knit 2 together. You can pair and add as many variations as you want. Just if you're adding 2 stitches and you don't want to increase 2, then just pair it with 2 decreases on either side. I usually go knit front back, double yarn over, SSK, and that makes the decreases angle away from it, and it doesn't make the double yarn over appear a little bit smaller. Totally personal preference, but that is how you work yarn overs to increase, yarn overs to keep things as they are, that stitch count, double yarn overs to increase, and then I simply talked about how to pair with decreases because you're going to be doing the same process as you would down here. Just remember, make sure when you go to work your double yarn overs, knit 1 leg and purl the other, or purl a leg and knit. You have to work them differently, or the double yarn over becomes a double yarn over with only 1 leg, and that makes the hole even bigger. If that's what you're going for, go for it. That will increase only 1 stitch, but have the look of a much larger yarn over. So you have different options. So that is going to tie up, if you will, our Swatch Lab for this week. Next, let's take a look at the updates for this week's project update section. We're going to look at Gnomes. We're going to look at the best scarf ever, which I'm abbreviating to BES. Sorry, that would be BSE. My brain wandered off for a moment. And then I'm not going to go over and show pictures of the temperature Afghan, but just know that I am making progress on it. Slow progress, but progress nonetheless. Our first update is going to be the Gnomes, and I have finished all the Gnomes up to the purl row, which begins the decrease section, okay? And I've just put them on waste yarn with a stitch marker showing where a needle's worth is, so that way it'll be easier when I pick it up. So all 4 Gnomes to the purl row, which again, the purl row starts the decrease section. They have all been knitted up, and for next week's video, I will have them completed, if all goes according to plan, and stuffed, and you'll see what those look like then. I've not added the beards and noses. I do that at the very end, but I just wanted you to see what they look like before they are stuffed, because as you work your decreases, you work part of the decreases and then stuff part of the gnome and work a few more and then stuff the gnome and then work it, close it up at the end. So I just wanted you to see pre-stuffed what these look like. My next project update is the best scarf ever, or as I said in the overview, the BSE. Again, the pattern section is called True Balance, one of my own design. And I did 3 repeats across and 3 repeats up and 2 across. And then working the body in blue. The purple stitch marker here, it shows where I was the last time I updated you. So I haven't worked as much on that. And that is okay, because I have been working on other projects, and it's not about how much you get done. It's not even about doing anything. It's about enjoying it. It's not a competition. If you get 1 inch, you have not failed because you didn't get 15. Work it at your pace. Little bits add up. My aunt always says chips make chunks. If you add a little bit and a little bit and a little bit and just keep doing that, you're going to have quite a bit. So it's like multiplying by 2 rather than by 0. If you multiply by 0, you're not making any progress. If you're multiplying by 2, you're going to constantly be seeing progress. If you multiply by 1, you're not getting anywhere. You're just staying the same number. So that was a convoluted way to say you're not judged on how far you get on a project. If you only get 1 stitch more than you had last week, now you have 1 stitch more, and that's something to celebrate. And next time, maybe you'll get 2, or maybe you'll get 15 inches. Who knows? Who cares? Enjoy your knitting. Next, let's take a look at our bonus bit for this week. We're going to be talking about knitting needle types. There was a comment in a previous video about aren't all knitting needles circular. So in this next bit, we're going to be talking about if they are all circular, and if not, how come, and what are the different types and styles of knitting needles, at least the ones that I have in my possession. So let's jump over to the overhead and take a look. As mentioned, this week's bonus bit is going to take a look at different types of knitting needles. So first off, we're going to talk about the regular old straight needles, and you have options in the materials. You have options for bamboo needles. You have options for wooden needles. There are plastic needles. And there are metal needles, okay? These are not all the same size, but the point simply is you have options in the materials you use. Each one of these will give you a slightly different gauge, so make sure you swatch first, because metal is going to be a lot slicker than, say, bamboo or plastic. I find these plastic ones to be the most grippy, actually. They're not a slick plastic. But those are the straight needles first off. Next, let's take a look at double pointed needles, also called DPNs. These I can zoom in a little bit. So they're called double pointed needles because they're a needle with 2 points, so they are double pointed. Simple enough. They come in sets of 4 or 5, depending on which brand. I prefer to use only 4 needles at a time. But that's just my personal preference, and I'm not going to get into how you knit with these. That can be its own video. So you have bamboo style, and I have synthetic, not plastic, but synthetic. Okay? So those are the options that I have of double pointed. You can also get them in metal, and you can also get them in wood, and you can also get them in a carbon fiber. So there's a lot of different options with double pointed needles. Next, we have what is called circular needles. Okay? And that is simply 2 needles that are attached by some sort of cordage, whether it be hollow plastic or wire or solid plastic, whatever it may be, but it is attached. 2 needles are attached by a cord. And you use these for knitting circular shapes, thus circular needle. So I have bamboo, again, not all the same size here. Metal, this one's hollow plastic, this one's solid plastic. Some are more flexible than other ones. Some you can, pinch in half if you're doing the magic loop method, which is something we'll talk about on a future video. And then there's another type of circular needle that is popular, and that is, I'm going to move these out of the way so we can focus on this one for a moment. That is what's called interchangeable needles. What that is you have your size needle, and you can have multiple sizes in a kit. It usually comes in a kit, but you can buy individually. And then they send multiple lengths of wire. So if you need a 24-inch needle, there's a short wire. If you need a 60-inch needle, there's a long wire. okay? It can be plastic, but in this case, it is wire. And all you do is you take your little needle, and you see it's where you can screw these into each other, okay? And you simply screw it in, and they send you something that they call a key. And you see that little bitty hole right there? You would take the key, put it in the hole, and then you can twist it tight so that way you have less chance of that coming apart. I don't care for interchangeable needles simply because the yarn will usually catch right here, and then you do still run the risk of it coming loose and your yarn catching, or heaven forbid it come out entirely. However, having said all that, interchangeables can be very good because they will often come with a plug, and you can take and screw that on the end if you need to. And what that will do is that will hold your stitches, and you can put 2 plugs on there, and now you have a large stitch holder. So in that regard, they are good. So again, we have interchangeable, zoom out a bit here, interchangeable needles, fixed metal, and fixed bamboo. So altogether, you know, we have our circulars here, we have our double pointeds, and we have our straight needles, okay? These are called straight needles simply because, yes, they are straight, but they have something at the end to where you cannot work from this end, okay? These are still straight needles, but you can work from either end, so these are going to be called double pointed needles. Some people will call these circular needles because you use double pointed needles to knit in a circle, but I think that's far more confusing. So double pointed, straights, and circulars. Now then, we have something else we can look at, and I want to focus on these double pointed needles for a moment, okay? I'm going to zoom back in. This is a regular double pointed needle, and as you can see, it is round. It has a round circumference, okay? And a regular tip, they can be sharp, they can be blunt like this one. This is relatively blunt. They can be more blunt. And you use more blunt if your yarn is prone to splitting, because a blunt tip will not do that. And then the shaft of it is the same all the way across. Then you have your taper, blunt, and again, it is round in circumference. Now then, as I mentioned, not all needles are technically circular in circumference. They can be like these right here. First of all, these have a teardrop at the end, which helps stitches from falling off and helps picking up stitches. You would think this would be a hindrance, but it is actually wonderful. These are my favorite double pointed needles that I have. Then these are round right here, but right here, and I'm not sure how I'm going to get this to show up, you can kind of see a crease. This section from right here to right here, that middle section, is a triangle shape, and that's very hard for me to show on camera. I'm not sure how I would do that, but just trust me that it is triangular in shape. And these are marketed as ergonomic because that triangle shape fits your hand better, and it's easier for people with arthritis or have trouble gripping a needle or knit a lot and just get general strain from knitting a lot. So they're called ergonomics. These happen to be 8 inches, whereas these are a 6-inch needle. You know what, that actually looks more like a 7. Either way, they come in different lengths, both of these. They come in as short as 4 and as long as, I haven't seen any longer than an 8. But these are a synthetic ergonomic, so the middle section is triangular, which again helps hold, but because it's slightly smaller than this up here, the stitches slide across much smoother. And you have this section, it's a smaller section to work your needle, to work your stitch, to make sure it's the correct size. You don't work your, let me show you on here. You do not work your stitches at the taper of your working needle because they will be too tight to spread out and land. Sorry, I didn't realize it was cloudy. You do not work on the taper, you work on the full section of the needle. That way your stitches are the right size. If you work them down here, they're going to be smaller and have to stretch, and that's going to distort your knitting. So these, that's the one drawback with these is, see how close I can get. Maybe you can kind of see the triangular. You have a smaller section to work, but you don't need a long section. You just need it long enough to work 1 or 2 stitches, depending on if you're doing it, like say a decrease or binding off. You only need a few sections, few stitches on there. And then you get this triangular. You can kind of see there's the ridge. That kind of glossy shows the ridge. And it's just slightly triangular. And again, that helps hold and helps the stitches glide across smoothly. So this brand is the one that's known for these. And you can look them up. It's Prim is what I call it. I'm not sure what the pronunciation is. But you would type up that and then ergonomic knitting needles and we'll pull up. You can get these. I bought these on Amazon. And I will put a link to that down in the description down below the timestamps. So that was a look at the types of needles. Again, pull these all out, pull these together. Straights, double pointeds, and circulars, along with a circular circumference needle and a needle that has a triangular side with a teardrop, the teardrop shape. So all needles are technically circular, at least at some point. You can buy needles that are a hexagon in circumference. You can buy them that's a square, and you can buy them, I think you can buy them that's complete triangle all the way across. So you have lots of different options when it comes to knitting needles, but I wanted to answer the question, aren't all needles circular? Well, no, because you have some that are triangle. However, when you talking about a circular needle, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be talking about something with a cord attached, whether it's a fixed cord or an interchangeable cord. One thing I forgot to mention as I'm talking about all these different needles and all the different materials is how the different materials that the needles are made from can affect your gauge. So let's take a look at that real quick, and hopefully this will be pretty quick. So we're just going to move those out of our way. Okay, so I knit up 5 different swatches here using 5 different needle types. I'm going to lay these out here. These have not been blocked. These are just fresh right off of the needle. There we go, and there we go. Now then, you may be able to notice some things right off the get-go about these swatches, namely that this one is the smallest and this one is the largest. So while they are all in different colors, they are all worsted weight yarn, and they were all knit on US 5 or US 8 or 5mm needles. So this orange needle was knit using the wooden needles. The gold was knit, not these needles in particular, but was knit with bamboo needles. The pink was knit with metal needles. The gray was knit with the plastic needles, and these blue were knit with the synthetic hybrid shaped needles. So there is definitely a correlation between needle type. Get this stuff out of our way here. There is definitely a correlation with needle type and gauge. I'm not going to go into a big thing on gauge because I have covered gauge in many different videos and I don't want to go in depth. But each one is 20 stitches wide, including the borders, and 23 rows long. So let's just look at this biggest one and measure. We're just going to measure from right here to right here. Okay, This part flares out, this part flares out. We're just going to measure right here. And so right there we have, using our handy dandy ruler here, zoom in so you can see, we have, that would be 4 and, see, that would be a quarter, so 4 5/8. You know what, this is filmed at the end of the day and my brain is shot, but you know, just shy of 4 1/4, okay? Let's take a look at this orange, measure the same place. A little bit closer. Oh, we're off screen. I'm sorry. I'm looking down at the actual swatch. So this one's is right at 4 1/4. This pink one, and again, I'm measuring the whole thing, not just the gauge swatch. Okay, and normally when you're measuring gauge, you would do just that. I just want to look at the overall width of these. This is just shy of 4 1/4. Down rather than over. This one is right at 4 1/4. So this plastic one and the one knit with wood gives you the same width across. Okay. Obviously, it looks like the rows are different lengths, but we're not focusing on that. We're just looking at the side to side. And then finally, this blue, that is the smallest. I'm going to just find a spot here that's roughly middle, and that's 4 inches. So that's a good 1/4 of an inch at least, if not up to this mark here. Difference in gauge swatches. So this one is tighter. This one is definitely looser. These were our two extremes in this deal. That said, when it comes to actually knitting the swatches, my favorite ones to knit with were these. Okay? So just for the sake of doing, I'm going to measure some stitches here. And I want to measure and see what I get over 2 inches. So we're going to burn a stitch there, so we're measuring so we know we got the for sure. And let's see what we have across here. We have, sorry if I bumped my microphone end, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I'm getting 5 stitches per inch, which is usual for stockinette. Now let's look up and see what I'm getting here. So you burn a stitch, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and a partial, like 12 1/4, 12 1/2 stitches. So that's round average for stockinette. This one, if we burn a stitch and measure the same 2 inches here, we get we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and a partial 9 1/4 stitches across. So I am 3/4 of a stitch shy, or extra. No, I'm 3/4 of a stitch shy from having the same gauge as in that blue. So my gauge is different, so I would have to accommodate that. When it comes to knitting the pattern, I would have to go down a needle size so that my stitches were smaller, and that therefore I would have more. So now let's measure up. And again, we're just briefly covering over this. I'm not trying to go in depth on this. Burn our stitch and measuring just to 2. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 stitches even. The other one was 12 and a half. So the row gauge wasn't as bad. However, that half stitch multiplies. So if I was doing 4 inches of this, that would be a whole extra stitch, which would throw off. So if they tell you to knit X amount of inches, or they tell you to knit X amount of rows, those numbers may not be equal. So that's something to think about, and that's why you gauge swatch. And not only gauge swatch, but try and gauge swatch with multiple materials, because you may be getting too big here using these bamboo needles, and you could go down a size, or maybe try a different material and see if you're getting something with a different material. All things to think about, and I just wanted to touch that in at the last bit. Zoom this out here and just go over once more these different needles and what I used with each one. So once more, the synthetic triangle shape, plastic, metal, I'm off screen, metal, bamboo, and wood. So material can make a huge difference in the overall pattern that you are knitting. To wrap up this week's video, we took a stash dive into the wild yarns, which is the final stash dive. We did a swatch lab together on double yarn overs, as well as working decreases for those. We looked at project updates, and our bonus bit, we looked at different needle types and how they can be used and when works best for which needle. So I hope you enjoyed this week's video and possibly learned something. I will see you next video.